Thank you all very much. I am more than flattered to be here, and I am more than grateful to have the opportunity to share an evening with those of you on both sides of this program, those who have served downrange and paid the consequences of that, those of you who are still at home and know how much we owe the veterans every day, not just on occasions when they get back at an airport in some fashion. So I think these kinds of occasions are a reminder, quite honestly, of the greatness of America. This is who we are across the fabric of this land. We're in the middle of a presidential campaign in which across the board, all the candidates are saying, America needs to be great again. No, America needs to come together again. It already has. It's great. And the fact of the matter is that I'm here, as so many of the guests and the staff members are, not because we are here to help those veterans who have paid such a high price. We're here because we want to bask in their glory. Be in your presence means so much to all of us who have not paid the price that all of you have. And that is a message that must be repeated again and again across the country. The fact of the matter is that we, on this side of the divide, are getting more from this evening than those of you who have paid these prices. And that's the lesson that the country needs to remember every day. Now, having said all of that, I've spent a lot of time in the war zones and a lot of time with veterans there and at Walter Reed and other places. And over the years, I've come to have such an affection for their esprit de corps, for how they just go forward. I almost never hear anyone complaining or whining. Now, one of the perfect examples is that I have a friend who was in Vietnam and lost a leg beneath the knee and got the Medal of Honor. His name is Bob Kerry. He's a senator from Nebraska. Bob and I were invited to Omaha a couple of years ago to do a big benefit for Warren Buffett, and he said, got a plane. After the event, you can go where you want to go. I said, Bob, let's go to South Dakota, go pheasant hunting. God, he said, I haven't done that in a long time. So I arranged for us to go to South Dakota and see some of my friends who go pheasant hunting. Bob's a wonderful guy. He's a god-awful shot. He didn't hit anything for 3 days. Finally, on the third day, I said to one of my friends, get right behind him. And when a rooster gets up, try to fire simultaneously so it'll appear that he got the shot. And in fact, it worked perfectly. So we all high-fived and got on the airplane and flew back to New York. And the next day I had to be at Walter Reed. The orthopedist there said, God, I've got a tough case. The young man I had to take off his leg this morning below the knee. And he said he'd never talk to me again unless he gets to meet you, but he's heavily sedated. So I went in. And he, in fact, was heavily sedated. A young man from Texas. I grabbed his hand and I squeezed it. And I said, I was just with a friend from Vietnam who lost a leg the same way you did. And we were in South Dakota pheasant hunting. And I couldn't keep up with him. It was true. I couldn't go over the fences as fast as he could, run through the corn rows as fast as he did. Keep going. There's another life for you out there, and you have to live it when you get out of here. And he got kind of moist and squeezed my hand again and again. And I walked out, barely in control of my emotions. And the doctor said, I'm taking you to 5 other patients. And you're going to repeat that story. So I'm now drained emotionally when I get back to New York and I call Bob Kerry and I say, thank you so much. You got me through a very difficult experience. And I repeated to him what I had said to that young man at Walter Reed, and there was a long pause. Bob lowered his voice and he said, you didn't tell him I couldn't hit my ass, did you? And it's that very spirit that keeps me coming back, because these are the authentic experiences in America. After all, this land, this very land, was settled by people who came to an unknown land and created the greatest democracy in the world. And they built the greatest cultural institutions in the world. And they built the heartbeat of civilization by making great sacrifice in wars and in life. And they did it together. They found ways to constantly move themselves forward. There is no other country in the world that has the spirit of volunteerism that America does. You can't go anywhere. You cannot go anywhere in the world and find people raising their hands for a variety of causes that they do in this country. The wealthy, the middle class, the working class, the poor step forward when the time is right. One of the underlying themes of the book that I wrote called The Greatest Generation is that that generation paid a huge sacrifice in their lives, beginning with the Great Depression, when everything was about scarcity and sacrifice and working together. And I honestly believe that that experience helped them take on the greatest threat the world has ever known to freedom, Nazi Germany. In 1938, we were the 16th military power in the world. Dwight Eisenhower, who by 1944 was leading the greatest invasion in the history of mankind, was a colonel. He had never seen a shot fired in anger. In 1944, the invasion was launched. The world was changed. Those men who had given up their youth to the Depression and then to the war came home, went to work, got the GI Bill, one of the genius ideas of the 20th century, and were making up for all the time that they had lost and never raising their hand and saying, "You owe me." And I grew up in their shadow. I grew up in an Army base first, and then I lived in projects that the Corps of Engineers were doing, so I was surrounded by them, but I'd forgotten about all their sacrifices because I was on that wave, not a baby boomer, born a little bit earlier, but I was on the wave where everything was possible for my generation. Everything was possible. College educations, good wages, good jobs. And then I went to Normandy. And when I got to Normandy the first day, I walked down Omaha Beach with two members of the Big Red One who landed in the first wave. Tiny men. A lot of people were smaller in those days. A lot of it was a result of malnutrition. And I said, "Tell me what you remember." One of them had earned the Medal of Honor later. The other one lost both legs in combat. And they looked at a specific spot on the beach. And they said, "We landed right there." Ramp went down. First sergeant was shot through the head, and the lieutenant was shot through the head. We were 18 years old. That was our introduction to combat. We stumbled off the landing craft, got to a tank trap, and terrified, got down behind it. When a colonel came loping down the beach and said to us, as if he were out for a morning run, "Gentlemen, there are two kinds of people on this beach. The dead and those about to be dead. You've got to move up. You've got to keep going." Turns out that Colonel Taylor, had rehearsed that line before the landing because he had landed in Italy. And he saw how things can go wrong if people get paralyzed on the beach. They did go forward. And they went to an uplift on the beach where sappers had gone in advance of them and detonated landmines and lost their legs or were gravely wounded themselves and said, "Step here, step there, step there." And they got to the top and they realized that this war would be won one day at a time. And they survived. By lunch, I was so shaken I didn't know what to do. And then I began to think about all the others that I had known over the years who had served in the war. And I came back determined to write about them. And it was an effort that did launch me into an entirely new and important part, not just of my journalistic life, but of my personal life, because it gave me an entirely new awareness of the meaning of courage, bravery, sacrifice, and most of all, citizenship and public service. Because citizenship and public service are the underlying elements that hold us all together. And they come not just during wartime, but citizenship and public service come on these occasions. You're exercising your responsibility as a citizen here tonight if you're part of Healing Waters. And you know as well that if you're one of the guests that are being honored, that you're exercising your responsibility to your country. And I am constantly in awe of that. I grew up in a really working class neighborhood. My dad wore a hard hat. He was driven out of his family at the age of 10. He was a mechanical and construction operation genius, and he gave me a good life because he married, in part, my mother, who was at the opposite end of the scale, a brilliant woman who graduated from high school at 16 but couldn't afford to go to college because it cost $100 a year. So I was her payoff. I had the journalism career that she wanted to have, and when I was writing about the greatest generation, I called her and I said, "Mother, whatever happened to Gordon Larson?" And she laughed and she said, "I know the story you're thinking about." My mother was a postmistress. A postmistress in a small town is the managing editor of that town. They see and hear everything that goes on. My mother would come home at night. I'd be 10 or 11 years old, sit me down and tell me her observations about our community. And they were always astute, and they always had an added lesson attached to them. And one night she came home and she said, it was the day after Halloween, she said, "Gordon Larson was in the post office today." Gordon Larson was the most cheerful man in town. He had, after the war, gotten training as a furnace technician, an air conditioning expert, and so he would come to your house to help with the furnace. He always had a pocket full of Tootsie Rolls, always had a joke. He would take in young Indian orphans and raise them in his own household because as a Marine, he always felt we don't leave anybody behind. And on that morning after Halloween, my mother was listening to Gordon, and for one of the few times in his life, he was kind of complaining. He said, "Those high school kids last night were kind of out of control." He said, "You know, they knew I was giving away a lot of Tootsie Rolls. They kept coming back. I got a little aggravated with them." Mother said, "Oh, come on, Gordon. What were you doing when you were 17? And he looked at her and he said, "I was landing on Guadalcanal." And he walked out. So I remembered that. And I called her and I said, "Where is Gordon Larson?" And she said, "I think he's in Idaho working on a dam." So I called and left a number for him to call me. Gordon called. We hadn't talked to each other in 25 years, and I said, "Gordon, I'm working on a book about World War II, and I remember that story of you landing on Guadalcanal when you were 17. You told it to my mother, she told it to me." Long pause, and he said, "I've never talked about this, ever. I watched my brother die on the beaches of Bougainvillea. A sniper shot him. We couldn't rescue him because we were all under fire. I left home a wild kid. I came home completely changed." Then there was this long pause in the phone call. I said, "Gordon, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, but I just realized I'm paying for this phone call." I said, "Give me your number, hang up, and I'll call you back." That, too, was that generation. They knew value, and they were not intimidated by anything. So the lessons that I learned from them have carried me forward. And this generation, going off to Afghanistan and to Iraq, are really the next greatest generation. Because they come home, and when they go to colleges, as I know from personal experience and from talking to the college presidents, they lift the campus in a way that is awesome to all the professional college administrators. Every campus in America now would like to have veterans of this war on their campus because of their discipline, and their ambition, and they're mission-oriented. That's who they are. And every veteran that I know, including those in this room, always say the same thing: "Sir, I'd like to get back with my unit if I could possibly." They were formed at an early and important stage in their lives, and they know what their obligations are. And so their gift is to us in a way that we need to appreciate every day. And that's the test of our generation as we go forward, as I know that we will, because of the resilience and the inherent financial, political, and legal strengths of this country. What we need to do is work very hard at finding ways to advance the American dream for everyone. And I know that we can do that. Now I want to say a word about my dear friend Lefty Kreh, who's here tonight. Over the years, I've met a lot of heroes. I was talking recently after the Ken Burns documentary ran about meeting Jackie Robinson for the first time. I had grown up with Jackie Robinson in distant South Dakota. My father and grandfather said to me when he was signed by the Dodgers have done something very important. We're going to be for the Dodgers. I was the only one in South Dakota who was a Dodger fan. Everybody else was a Cardinal fan or those damn Yankee fans. So I had to put up with them. Anyhow, I met him finally. And I was waiting to do an interview with Nelson Rockefeller. He was close to Nelson Rockefeller. It was a big deal in California, and I had the most important political interview program. And he came in behind Rockefeller, and I was like a babbling schoolboy going over there to meet him. So over the years, I've met all the sports heroes and other heroes that I want to meet in life. Ted Williams, for example. Michael Jordan, I got to be quite close at one time. I had dinner for the second year in a row at the Hall of Fame this past year with Sandy Koufax and Joe Torre and Bob Gibson. These are the rewards of a life that you have when you have some visibility and you're shameless about meeting the people that you want to meet. I was shameless about this man, Lefty Kreh. I wanted to meet him. I'd read about him. I'd watched all of his casting tips. I'd gotten to know from other people exactly who he was. And then I did get to meet him. And we were in a boat the first time that we were there together in a place called Deepwater Key. And of course, all the guys were aware that Lefty Kreh was there. So we go out in the boat, and we have a mixed morning, and we break for lunch. And the guys immediately get up on the bow of the boat and start throwing. Going to show off to Lefty Kreh. I don't know how many of you have heard him speak, but he has this kind of wonderful, engaging verbal thing in which he says something and he says, right after he says it. So I said, Lefty, that guy's pretty good. And Lefty said, yeah, but he's dumb. This big guy turns around and says, what did you just say? I just said, you're pretty good, but you're dumb. And he gave him a little tip, and within 5 minutes, the guy was throwing 25 feet further. The other guy gets up, and Lefty does the same thing. Yeah, he's pretty good, but he's dumb as well. So we fixed his. What I knew was that Lefty had been in World War II. I knew it had been a big war. He was with the 69th Battalion. They went across Northern Europe. They ended up in the Battle of the Bulge. 2 years ago, I was the presidential envoy, the 70th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, and I went out into the Ardennes forest on a snowy, cold day. And some of the original foxholes are still there. The Americans were outnumbered 200,000 to 80,000. Germany threw everything they had at us at that point. It was Hitler's last gasp. The weather was so bad that the trees, in effect, became shrapnel. Lefty was a forward observer. He was way out on the front. And as much as anything, he said he worried about those frozen trees becoming shrapnel. And he woke up every morning with a big icicle pancake on his fanny. But he got through it. And he went to the Elba, met the Russians, and he came home. And I said, do you want to tell me any kind of harrowing World War II stories? He said, no, but I've been waiting to tell you my favorite story for a long time. He said, we had two good old boys in our outfit. They were junior high dropouts. They were very close friends. They could run through the night, shoot the eyes of a running rabbit. And we were pretty nervous. We had our rucks in place. We were going into the Battle of the Bulge the next day. And one of them said to the other one, did you get yourself any of that life insurance we're supposed to get? The other good old boy said, I did. I got me $5,000 worth of life insurance. How much did you get? And the other good old boy said, I got me $10,000 worth of life insurance. The $5,000 guy said, now why would you get $10,000 worth of life insurance? You're not going to be around to enjoy it. And the $10,000 guy said, dummy, stop and think about it. Who are they going to put on the front lines? The guy they have to pay $5,000 to, or the guy they have to pay $10,000 to? You're in the presence of an American icon. I don't use that term lightly. An American legend. Not just as the greatest fly fisherman of our time, but also as one of the great citizens. Grew up very poor in Maryland, dedicated his life to the outdoors and to teaching people everything not just about fly fishing. He'll tell you how to lace up your boots, by the way, if you give him a chance. And within about 4 minutes, when he came to the ranch in Montana, he and my youngest daughter, who just had her first child, had so bonded that by the end of the day, he was the honorary godfather of that first child. So I'm here to tell you that a lot of you come up to me and say, you've been listening to me for a long time, and that you've been very complimentary. The honor is mine. The honor is mine to have the opportunity that I've had to cover the big stories around the world, try to get them right, try to keep journalism on an even course, try to celebrate the goodness of this country and the greatness that is yet to come, because I honestly believe that. And to be in the presence of Americans who every day wake up and think about what they can do for their fellow citizens. So congratulations to all of you and to the veterans who are here in ways that we can never adequately express. We're enthralled by sharing this country with you, sharing this evening with you. And we will go home and say to our friends and neighbors, I was in the presence of greatness last night. Thank you all very much. Thanks so much. Thanks all of you. Thanks very much.